Welcome to Pretty Lies and Alibis. Let's seek the truth and travel the long road to justice together. What you know, Alibiers, it's almost Tuesday. I'm late, but just got Grammy all settled into her little rehab facility to get her back on her feet strong. Yes, it's a wonder your girl hadn't needed some bail money. It's been a very crazy week. She had an allergic reaction to some medicine, which put her into a medication-induced Alzheimer's state. It has been just a very odd week, a scary week. And I have to say, we've never had to deal with Alzheimer's in our family, and much love and respect to people who care for people, loved ones with Alzheimer's. It was something I hope I never have to go through again. And a week was enough for me. I can't imagine months and years of seeing your loved one that way. Just never dreamed of what people went through. So she'll be coming here, by the way, in about 2 or 3 days, we're hoping. And I really don't care if she ever goes back home. She can just stay with me. I would be the happiest girl ever. Love that lady. Thank you all for the well wishes. So today, y'all, we're finished with George Wagner. And it's weird to listen to the victim impact statements. He's gone for good because we've been doing this for a couple of months now. And it has been a long road to justice. This case is the definition of a long road to justice. 2016. We are almost in 2023, but we have 3 down, 1 to go. Before we jump in, MTV's most played video is Peter Gabriel's Sledgehammer from 1986, which featured the stop motion technique. And that is where you capture images 1 frame at a time. The video, while it was being filmed, Peter Gabriel, who I love, y'all, love me some Peter Gabriel, had to lie underneath a sheet of glass for 16 hours. By the way, the video still holds the record for most MTV Video Music Awards at 9. Crazy after all these years and all the videos that came after Sledgehammer that still holds the most, but it's great. So what's going to happen after Wagner now that this is over? What am I going to do? Well, I'm going to update this week on some cases we've been following, as well as a couple of cold cases I found or unsolved cases, not necessarily cold, but anyways, we're going to do that. But I'm looking for a little trial to cover, maybe that lasts a week or two up until Murdaugh. And then I got some really interesting things in the work for Murdaugh. Nothing's official yet, but could be really cool for the podcast. I'll keep you posted. Can't wait to share it with you when things get wrapped up and finalized. All right. So the morning started with the hearing of that motion by the defense, where they asked for a new trial, saying that the jury should have been made aware much earlier that Jake had death taken off the table for himself, and the defense should have had access to Jake's conversations with his lawyers. So what happened with that? Denied. So now we're going to hear from these living victims of these 8 souls that were taken within hours. So Judge Deering goes on to say that in the snowball chance in the hot place, George ever gets out, he would have to register on the violent offender registry since he's been convicted of 8 murders. And George can argue this, saying he wasn't a principal offender. And the state obviously asked for the maximum penalty, considering the impact on the family and the families. She says this was one of the most serious murder cases in Ohio history, and he does not deserve mercy. Overall, what did I think? I'm going to tell you, I've watched a lot of victim impact statements, and it's always powerful because you're hearing for the first time these families that have been affected in the same room with the person with the forum to address them. And it's always powerful. 1 murder, usually, maybe 2, but this is 8, y'all, 8 people, 8 human beings. It's always blown my mind since the day it happened, what they did in such little time, the lives destroyed forever. Generations of Rhodens and Gillies will deal with this. And that area, Pike County. So George really didn't show emotion, and I didn't expect him to. He kind of kept his head up, but his eyes were down. And I was curious, why is he in street clothes, by the way? He's a convicted murderer now. Usually at sentencing, they come in their stripes because there's no jury there. Not sure why. Can't imagine being in that room today. Now, what I decided to do for this episode is it's not my place to read these victim impact statements. The emotion and the passion in their voices is something that I would never try to duplicate. And it is something that needs to be heard. So a lot of my listeners, ironically, don't have social media or even deal with YouTube. So if you're on YouTube, I have the video. And if you're listening, I have the audio of some of the victim impact statements. I did clip some of them due to the length. I did not clip out anything I felt was defining of these victims. If things kind of had been said by another victim about a certain person, that's kind of what I took out. It was just a timing thing. And the only statement that I did not capture on audio, I had a really hard time getting it cleaned up. A lot of you guys asked if I was going to do something about the impact statements. Apparently, the audio was an issue for several people. And the first one was Hannah Hazel's Aunt Angel. That was read by a victim's advocate. And I could not hear that audio very well. I do plan to go back and put that on YouTube later. But one quote that I did hear, karma drives a big bus. And yes, it does. So next up is Hannah Hazel's mom. And I'm going to tell you right now, this woman has waited a long time to be in the same room to tell George Wagner what she thinks of him and his family. And obviously, she is a huge part of Kylie's life. Remember, this is Charlie Gilley's mom and Hannah Hazel's mother. So 2 of her grandchildren have been affected, Kylie and Ruger, who was Frankie and Hannah Hazel's son, 6-month-old son that was in the middle of the bed, covered in blood when the bodies were found. So if the audio is a little unpredictable, you might have to adjust your speakers. I did the best I could, but sometimes I had to turn it up. So this first clip is Andrea Shoemaker, Hannah Hazel's mother.
George Wagner IV, let me introduce myself. You see, you said out of your own mouth that you never met my daughter, Hannah Hazel Gilley. I'm her mom, Andrea Shoemaker. I stand here today to be her voice, since you, George Wagner IV, and your evil family took her. I'm supposed to stand here today and give a victim's impact statement. I have no idea. I have never done any sort of paper like this. And I have no idea. I've never done anything like this. So I did what most people do. I Googled it. But as soon as the word victim popped up, I looked at the definition just to see what exactly it says. Victim means a person harmed, injured, or killed as a result of a crime, accident, or other event or action. Wow, now that's powerful, because that is what the evil George Wagner family, George Wagner IV, and your evil family have done. My victims list: Chris Sr, the young age of 40 years old; Kayla and Lisa, only the young age of 37. I was just getting to know you not long before you welcomed my sweet Hannah Hazel Gilley into your family. Both of you actually loved your grandchildren. My heart breaks for all of you, for all of your grandchildren, as they will never know the great Papa and Nana you truly were. They will only hear stories about how wonderful you really are. As for Chris Sr, my heart aches for your mother to have lost 2 sons in one night. Just so unfair to her. For Dana's mom and dad, the pain of both of your parents. Phil, for you, your father, to not live on this earth, to see justice for his daughter, so heartbreaking. 2 lives taken too soon, but never forgotten. Kenneth Rhoden, only the young age of 44 years old. I know this much about this man, that he loved his nephew My grandson, Ruger Rhoden, because he stopped at Frankie and Hazel's home all the time. A great friend to my oldest daughter, as for she seen him every day he ate dinner where she worked. A father figure to my son. Oh, how my heart breaks for your mother. A life taken too soon, but never forgotten. Gary Rhoden, a young age of 38 years old. I dislike the fact that I never got to know you, but seeing you in the garage under the hood of a vehicle as Hannah, her son, Ruger Rhoden, and I sat on a sheet in her yard or on the porch, just miss that so much. Another life taken too soon, but never forgotten. Christopher Rhoden Jr. Only the age of sweet 16. Just a child that was still learning about life, now unable to live it. Oh, how I miss your sassy mouth and your fierce attitude. For someone to kill or stand and watch as you are being killed is the devil. Hannah Mae Rhoden, only the young age of 19 years old. As George Wagner IV said, this girl is like a little sister to me. Hannah Mae and my son was the first to give me my biological granddaughter. Her name is Kylie. Hannah Mae was such an innocent young lady, a great mother to two beautiful girls. I watched your baby girl, Kylie, mourn to know who her mommy was. I answered questions that should have never had to be asked in the first place. My heart is forever broken that she and her sister will never know the mommy you were. Another life taken too soon, but never forgotten. Frankie Rhoden. 7 Rhodens and 1 Gilly in one night. I still wait for her to come through my door, all the while answering questions from her son, wanting to know things about his mommy and his daddy, as well as Hannah Mae's little girl. Have you ever had to deal with things like that? No, George Wagner IV, you haven't, because you told your own son that your own mother was his mommy. How sick and twisted is the Wagner family. Thank God none of you didn't get to raise those kids to be adults, because those poor babies would have turned out like the devils you, George Wagner, and the rest of your family are. All I want is my baby girl, Hannah Hazel, and that I will never have. I only agreed to the state because I want all these older families to get justice on earth while they're still here, because of the fact that Gary's dad, Dana's dad, and my dad didn't get their justice while on this earth. This is the most monstrous act. Your cousin said it the best, that any family could have done to 3 different families and George Wagner IV. What have you won? What have you won after all you've done? And I thank you, Judge. And I pray, Judge Judy, that you see the true devil that George Wagner IV really is, and make him suffer with life in prison. Thank you.
Can't get more powerful than that. I was speechless. Just a few things. She said, I have to answer questions that should never have to be asked. And so as we were talking, that is Charlie Gilly, Hannah Hazel's brother, also the mother to baby Kylie, who was just days old when her mom was murdered right beside her. And wow. And when she said, I hope your son learns what a monster you really are and grows up wanting nothing to do with you. I want you to die like the family you killed and my baby girl. You have to wonder what goes through George's mind when she says something that is true, which is these kids are going to learn that their family were evil monsters, and they were all about these kids just in the wrong way. And had they turned that into a positive thing, it could have been powerful in a whole other sense, but evil won, y'all. So the other thing, the devil always hunts in the dark, just like you did, George Wagner, with your evil family in one night on April 21st and 22nd. What have you won? Wow. That's a mom. That is a mom with a vengeance. And I felt every word of that. So next we have Kendra Rhoden, who is the daughter of Kenneth. And so we're going to hear what she had to say. And here we go.
As I stand here today, I know I should feel peace. I should have peace because you have been found guilty on all 22 counts. I should feel relief that justice is being served. But there is no real justice, and peace is not a feeling I have. Hannah Mae was my peace, and because of you and your family, she is gone. 8 lives taken and so many more traumatized by the horrendous acts committed by the Wagner family. For months, I was riddled with questions of who and why. I tried to find solace in the belief that most of my family members died instantly from being shot in the head. Unfortunately, that was not true. When signing for my father's lifeless body, the coroner stated my father died within minutes of being shot. Minutes, not seconds. So now I'm left wondering, for how long did he remain conscious? Did he feel the pain? How long was he conscious for, knowing his death was imminent and there was nothing he could do? What went through his mind in those moments that I imagine felt like hours as he died alone? What about Hannah Mae as she lay next to her nursing infant? Did she die in fear, not knowing what would happen to her child? How long did she lie there helplessly, knowing she could do nothing to protect her infant from the evil that stormed through her home that night? The questions were accompanied by nightmares night after night. Lack of sleep drove me crazy. I thought I could not escape it. Every time I closed my eyes, I was taken back to that horrific moment I found out that my family was murdered and what I believe they went through. Screaming out in horror for Hannah to wake up and run as her attacker approaches, but nothing I done changed the outcome. Unfortunately, when I woke, I still could not escape the terror. It was and is still real. It wasn't just another terrifying dream. Sons and daughters left without their mothers and fathers, a mother grieving her son, a daughter-in-law, and her grandkids. Some whose lives was just beginning, one as young as 16 years old. I begged for anything to stop the never-ending pain and grief, to the point I nearly ended my own life in December of 2017. In 2018, I had my daughter. It should have been a moment filled with nothing but joy. Instead, it was filled with heartache, knowing my father would never hold my daughter. My daughter frequently asked to see Papa Kenny, a man she never got to meet. I am burdened with telling her she can't, and naturally she asks why. She sees me cry and holds on to me because I have no words to offer other than Papa Kenny lies with Jesus. She will never know his unconditional love. She will never get to hold his rough but gentle hands. She will never get to experience how Papa Kenny's strong embrace made the world melt away and made everything better. Now, as I plan for my wedding, I dread walking down the aisle because my father will not be walking with me or handing me over as a father should. I won't look over to the bridesmaids and see Hannah Mae as my maid of honor. I won't see Frankie in the crowd making some sort of commotion to make me laugh and calm my nerves. Christopher won't be there as the life of the party, making a scene as his usual goofy self. Furthermore, I'm reminded that Hannah won't be there for her daughter's first heartbreak to comfort them. She won't be there to teach them and help them grow into the beautiful women they will be. Hannah will not be there to prepare them for their big days. She couldn't even be there for her youngest daughter's first steps. Frankie will not be there to teach his boys how to be men. He won't be there to share knowledge and prepare them for the hardships of the world. You see, 8 lives were taken in the most brutal of ways, but many more lives were stolen. You took moments that were no more yours to take than the life you and your family took. I am sorry you never got to know the unconditional love of a mother and father, but it does not excuse your participation in the grim murders your family committed as a whole. You yourself stated anyone who committed such a horrendous crime should be punished with death. My family and I are not asking for your demise, but I do ask that you receive the max penalty. It is not justice, but I believe in my heart it is the closest we can get.
So that is Kendra Rhoden, Kenneth Rhoden's daughter. And also, she was super close to Hannah Mae Rhoden. And she said she actually considered suicide in 2017 and had a daughter of her own the next year and has to answer questions about her absent father and her grandfather. What was powerful to me is she said, "I'm sorry you never got to know the unconditional love of a mother and a father." And that's very true. I don't think we know Jake and George never had any kind of a normal upbringing, but it's not an excuse. People have really bad childhoods. They don't go out and murder 8 people in one night. So it's not an excuse, but I thought that was powerful because clearly Kendra did. So the next one was, let's see here. We have Chelsea Robinson, y'all. The mother of Frankie's oldest son, who was in the house and 3 years old at the time. Y'all, she reads a letter that Brentley wrote to George.
My first little statement is actually one that my son has written himself, a victim of the night, who has now since turned 10. There's a lot of things that he doesn't even want to discuss with me. There's a lot of things that he doesn't even come to me and talk to me about because he's scared. But he has written this himself and brought it to me. These are things that he hasn't even discussed with me, and he wanted George to know. Dear George, I find myself wondering why you killed my daddy. There are things that make me sad because I can't learn from him. He could have taught me stuff like working on derby cars and coon hunting. My mommy tries, but it's not as good as Daddy was. I have been scared since that night, knowing bad guys came into my house while I was sleeping. I'm always scared now that I will lose my mommy. You did that to me. I just want you to know that I hate you and your family. These are the words of a 10-year-old boy. Just to grow up without a dad who doesn't have a dad. I couldn't imagine that. Your kid is only 6 months old, younger than mine. No, he doesn't have his dad. Just want to follow with my own little statement here. The impact death has on children can be difficult. They feel it. They understand it, no matter how old they are. For a child that has the parent murdered while they sleep in another room and being watched as they sleep is honestly, there's just no word for it. For him to tell me he watched his daddy's hand fall while he tried to wake him up because his baby brother's screaming is traumatic itself. I don't know to this day what he has seen in that bedroom, and I think he has shut it out, or I at least pray that he has shut it out. But knowing that he has seen stuff hurts my heart so much. The sleepless nights, the panic attacks, and constant worry is so exhausting. You and your family did that, not thinking of that, though, when you made those choices to end multiple lives. You made decisions thinking it would make your life easier. How about a boy who's missed out on growing up with his brother? The one person who gets him in this mess misses out on those things. Did you know at the time there is no childhood therapists, trauma therapists, who cover Ohio's largest crime in or around Scioto County? As a single mom who was only 21 years old at the time, dealing with losing people so close to her, had to travel just to get her kid the care he needed to have to be so strong. And just to have to be so strong for someone who is dealing with that, with far more than I could ever imagine. You know what kept me going through? Knowing I had an amazing support system to keep me going, even though it bothered them too secretly. I know her heart breaks, and that is my mama. That is what a real mom does. They don't cower down and plot to kill an entire family because they don't get their way. My mother has loved every one of these Rhodens, including Hannah Hazel. They still treated us as family because you can have a civil relationship even if you're not together. I was always raised to love someone. I still love the father of my child. We were just better apart. It made the real thing that mattered happier, knowing his parents were happy together or apart. That's called healthy co-parenting. I look back now on the times I had to spend.
The holidays are upon us.
Go to oneofherflowers.com
and celebrate the people you love. Happy holidays!
With you and your family afterwards. The times that you guys wanted to be so close to me, and now I get it. I felt so uncomfortable, but I wanted so bad for B to still have a relationship with his soapy suds, but I knew deep down I didn't ruin that. Jake told me I did, but I didn't ruin that. You and your family did. The moral of me getting up here, though, is to continue to show my baby how strong I am and will continue to be. This is his story, and I'm just living it. We may have been friends in the past, but for you to get up here on that stand and take an oath and still lie on me, excuse me, Honor, but I hope you burn in hell, George. I will say there's one thing I have learned, is that God wants us to forgive, and maybe one day I will forgive you, but at this time I just can't.
So Brentley, as we know, was 3 when the murders happened. He was in the house for hours with his dead parents and his little 6-month-old brother, Ruger, who was in between his dead parents. And if you happen to be watching the closings when they accidentally put that picture of Hannah Hazel up, we had heard about it, the little marks on her body from where baby Ruger was patting her, and why did you kill my daddy? And then I've never been scared since that. I've been scared since that night. Bad guys came in my house while I was sleeping. I'm scared of losing my mommy. You think about it, 3 years old, we think that memories are so selective at that age, but I don't remember much at 3, but I guess maybe when you lived that, things stick. And even if you don't remember specifics, I think that trauma kind of is embedded in your DNA. And again, just another example of a 10-year-old living victim who has a lot of life to live without his daddy. And thank goodness he's got a very, very strong and smart mother. You look at Frankie and Chelsea, they, like she said, you co-parent together. You make it work, even though you're not good together. And you think, had George and Jake both just accepted they weren't with the ones they were meant to be with and did things civilly, we would never be here. And I always say Tabitha's very lucky. There's a lot of things I wonder about that night. Had they had time, or maybe that would have been too big of a plan. But Chelsea and Tabitha have their work cut out for them. And so does whoever's raising Sophia and Kylie. And I think it seems like Hannah Hazel's mom is very involved in Kylie's life, and I'm sure Ruger's as well. But this is his story, and I am living it. That's powerful, because she will always live that. She will always deal with the after effects of this with Brentley. And excuse me, Judge, I hope you burn in hell, George. So Bobby Joe Manley was had the victim's advocate read hers.
I, Bobby Manley, am writing this letter because I believe my voice needs to be heard. I would like to thank the prosecuting attorneys and the jury for their time. I'm Dana's baby sister, the aunt of Frankie, Hannah, and Chris Jr. I'm here speaking on behalf of them and the other lives that you took from us. I have many feelings, but the strong one is grief. On April 22nd, 2016, you changed my life and many other lives. You came like thieves in the night and took my family from us. It is not fair what you did. There is no real explanation what you did or why. Since that day, you have shown no remorse. You have sat there and laughed, smirked, and mocked my family, all while lying and saying that you had nothing to do with it. You're a coward, and you're not worth oxygen you're wasting right now. Sadly, with the death penalty off the table, I can only hope that they lock you up for the rest of your miserable life. I can't believe you have the audacity to sit there and act like you didn't do this. It disgusts me that you're allowed to exist. It disgusts me that you're allowed to breathe the same air that I am breathing. That's enough about you, because this day is not about you. This day is about my family and the people you have hurt and traumatized. This day is about Chris Jr., who was only 16 years old, and because of you and your family, he will forever be 16 years old. Today is about Hannah Mae, who was only 19 years old. Frankie and Hannah Gilly, who will never get to watch their children grow up, but neither will you. Your child will remember nothing about you except that you're a monster and a murderer. They were just babies and had hardly started their lives. Now, we will never know who they may have become. This day isn't about you. This day is about my sister, Dana Rhoden, and getting justice for her and her family. You only murdered Chris Rhoden and Gary Rhoden and Kenneth Rhoden because you are a coward and you know they would retaliate. They were all completely innocent and hadn't done anything to you or your family. There's a special place in hell for you and your entire family. I hope your life is long and miserable. I hope you think of my family and what you have done every day for the rest of your miserable existence. Thank you.
Your Honor, Ms. Kerr is going to now read a statement from Ruth Rhoden.
Ruth Rhoden, victim impact statement. I would like you to know that you killed more than 8 people. Kenny, Gary's father, literally grieved himself to death over the murder of his son and the others in the family. Gary was a good-hearted person, and he would give you the shirt off of his back. He never missed his father's birthday or mine. He made it to every holiday. I truly feel that you did so much more of these crimes and that you're just not admitting to them. Today, December 19th, is Gary's birthday. He would have been 45 years old. I ask for justice for Gary and the other members in this family. Thank you.
So next up is April Manley, who, as we know, testified in the trial. She opted in. I always will say the Rhodens and the ones who loved them opted in for the most part. And I wouldn't have judged any of them if they had opted out, because they're the ones that maybe don't want to see their grief on a world stage. But April Manley, like many other of the Rhodens and the Gilly family, got up there and showed their face, unlike some cowards in this trial. But April Manley, you could tell she reminds me a lot of my Aunt Angie, actually. Angie called all of us her babies. My Aunt Angie didn't have children, so we were her babies. And I really felt a lot of my Aunt Angie, that protective second mother, bonus mom, sister, friend that April was to all of her nieces and nephews. So we're going to hear from April Manley.
Hello, my name is April Manley. I'm the wife of James Manley, brother of Dana Rhoden. As I stand here today, I realize I'm standing here for my father-in-law, Leonard. See, Leonard fought a short fight with liver cancer. All he wanted to do was be with his baby girl, Dana Rhoden, and make sure she was okay. For that reason, he wouldn't fight for his life. Leonard would tell us time and time again that he was sorry for leaving us, but he just couldn't walk this world without Dana any longer. He made me promise that I would see these trials through, that I would be at every court date. So here I stand today at the end of one of them. I don't only stand here for Leonard, but myself as well. You see, James Manley and I will be married 28 years this week. The Rhodens are not just not. The Rhodens are also my family, but in heart as well. I was the maid of honor at Dana and Chris's wedding. I was at the hospital at the births of Frankie, Hannah, and little Chris, or as I call them, Spanky, Hanny, and Monkey. I was also at the births of Frankie's boys, Hannah's girls. Due to Dana being a young mom and a full-time student and working full-time as an STNA from graduation till her death, I babysat Frankie, Hannah, and little Chris from the time they was born until they was old enough to stay by themselves. Even after they was old enough to look after themselves, I would still see them daily. That's why I refer to them as my babies. Then comes the morning of April 22nd, 2016, where all of our lives changed forever and will never be the same again. Not one, not two, but 8 family members were taken away from us. It was like the bottom fell out of my soul. Hundreds of people around me, but I felt like I walked this world alone. Weeks of being in denial, even after seeing them laying there in their coffins, looking at them saying, that's not my loved ones, they look nothing like them. Their faces so unrecognizable. Convincing myself they were just hiding for something and they was coming back home to us as soon as it was over, but they never came home. The Manley Rhodens and Gillies have missed out on so much due to the Rhodens being taken from us way too soon. So many holidays, birthdays, weddings, births, big celebrations were taken from us. It wasn't just my life affected by the tragedy, but also of many others. My mother-in-law, Judy Manley, now walks this world without her daughter, her grandchildren, her son-in-law, our friends Kenneth and Gary, but now she also walks this world without her husband, Leonard, who just couldn't handle it, the pain any longer. To this day, my husband starts screaming, sis, in his sleep. It's the only thing he called Dana. My oldest son, who's a firefighter, says he has seen some gruesome things as a firefighter, but nothing will ever compare to seeing Frankie and Hannah laying there and all that blood. You see, Frankie wasn't only his cousin, that was his best friend. I watched my youngest son walk across the stage at his high school graduation with a picture of Hannah Mae pinned on his gown with a cap and tassel, so Hannah Mae could graduate with him like she was intended to do. Within the group of her fellow classmates sat an empty chair with Hannah's picture and her cap and her gown. My stepson was never afraid of the dark. He is now 15 years old and still won't go outside by himself after dark. He says they came in the dark and took them all away. Before that night, he was never afraid. My grandchildren will never meet their Aunt Dana, their Uncle Chris, their Uncle Kenneth, cousins Frankie, Hazel, Hannah, little Chris, or Gary. There's still many more family members that are missing out on the family lives because of the Wagners took it upon themselves to be the judge and the jury. They decided that my family's lives were to come to an end at their hands. My mother taught me to forgive and forget, but right now I can't follow that rule. The Wagners have taken so much from us that I just can't forgive right now. I don't know I ever will. And for that reason, I hope George Wagner spends the rest of his life in prison without seeing your loved ones for the rest of your life, just like you made sure we wouldn't see ours. I hope you feel the loneliness and the emptiness that we feel for the rest of your life. And I have one last wish for you, George. Since you and your family made sure you were the last ones to see our family alive, I hope every night when you close your eyes, you see them 8 faces, and I hope they haunt you for the rest of your life.
One thing I remember so clearly is when she was testifying and she talked about seeing Jake at the hospital to check on the kids. And she said he hugged her. And then when she found out they had been arrested, it just made her sick because she said he hugged me and he still had my baby's blood on him. And she just said she called them her babies because that's what good aunts do. They are bonus moms and sisters. Bless her heart. And when she talked about their faces being so unrecognizable at the funeral home and they didn't look like themselves, and she convinced themselves they were just hiding and they'd be back. You know, as adults, it's just that shock. You revert back to that childlike, this isn't real, that denial. That's so, I mean, eight lives. How do you go in there and look at eight family members who were all shot in the head and ever be okay again? You think about Bobby Joe Manley, and I mean, she found Chris Sr and Gary. She found Frankie and Hannah Hazel. And just like April, her son went in there and saw those bodies, and he's a fireman. They see stuff all the time, but it's your family too. It's just got to be very, I can't even imagine, y'all. But Bobby Joe Manley, the audio on that was just terrible. And so I really do want to get hers. She was put through the ringer in the early days of this investigation. She had to take lie detector tests. She was under a lot of scrutiny by law enforcement. I know whoever finds the body first sometimes is who they look at first. But man, I mean, just the trauma of all that. And then initially being kind of a suspect. I know they have to rule out, but I don't think any of these family members, Rhoden or Gillies, will ever have a day that's just normal. In the back of their mind, something will pop up. And this is not like an illness where, even with illness, I've had family members die of cancer, and like my uncle this year, and it's coming, but when it happens, it's still traumatic, and it's almost like you didn't know it was coming. Can you imagine waking up and finding out 8 people in your family are gone, just murdered brutally? I just can't, y'all. And now it's time for a word from our paid sponsor of the week, Wondery by Amazon. Scamfluencers is a podcast from Wondery that tells the unbelievable true stories behind some of the world's most infamous scams, swindlers, and con artists. Recently, they covered the rise and fall of Martin Shkreli, who gained prominence in 2015 when his pharmaceutical company raised the price of a life-saving drug by 5,000%. Hailed by Wall Street, but vilified by Main Street, the ensuing scandal garnered attention from the federal government. And they soon learned price hikes were only the tip of the iceberg, and Shkreli had even deeper secrets he was hiding. Charges were filed, but the arrogant Shkreli would not go down without a fight. I love this podcast because it exposes the scams that many people fall victim to, and it also brings awareness to the scams we have no choice of falling victim to, such as the pharmaceutical scam with Martin Shkreli. It helps me protect the people I love by exposing scams from social media influencers, fashion, finance, health, and wellness scams that are far too common in today's online world. You should listen too, because at the end of the day, if you're online, you're at risk. Follow Scamfluencers wherever you get your podcasts. You can listen ad-free on the Amazon Music or Wondery app. So they read a statement from Ruth Rhoden, who is Gary's mother. His father died before trial, as well as Leonard Manley, as April said. And that's 2 other victims. They grieved themselves to death. But today would have been Gary's 45th birthday. Bittersweet. So next up, we have Kayla Rhoden, cousin of Frankie, Hannah Mae, Chris Jr., and we're going to play That's Kayla and Lisa.
My name's Kayla, and I am the niece to Chris, Kenneth, and Dana, and a cousin to Gary, Hannah Mae, Hannah Hazel, Frankie, and little Christopher. This is not a victim impact statement for myself or the rest of my family. This is a plea that you sentence this man to the maximum penalty for all charges. George may not have shot anyone as it was told or in an attempt to lessen his role, but he was still there with the intent to kill at least one victim. He helped plan this, he helped in executing it, and then he helped in trying to cover it up. He helped hand a death sentence to all 8 victims, and then he helped, but Your Honor, this isn't just about these 8 victims whose lives were taken. This is also about 4 children. 4 children whose lives were torn apart because of this man and his actions. Brentley must live with the fact that he woke up to find his daddy and soon-to-be stepmommy dead. He had to see his baby brother covered in blood. We don't know what would have happened had he woke up while 3 men were in his home, and we thank God every day that he didn't. But Brentley at least has his mommy, who can be both parents. But he will forever have a part of him that will never heal from this, because he will never have his father or his close family again. Ruger will never know what it was like to have both parents, and he was so young that he will never remember them or remember the love that they had for him. That's the same for Kylie. She will never know her mother's love or the possibility of having a father who chose to be that to her. Lastly, Sophia must grow up living with the fact that not only was her family murdered, but they were murdered supposedly because of her, and that it was her father and his family who had done it. See, all of us in the Rhoden, Manley, and Gilly families try to make life as normal as we can for them, and we try to show them that they are loved. So I ask you, Your Honor, to please sentence this man to the maximum penalty possible, because he sentenced 8 people to death and 4 children to a life sentence of pain and suffering. He does not deserve freedom outside the walls of a prison cell. Thank you.
I'm Lisa, Chris and Kenneth's niece. Thank you, Your Honor, for allowing me to speak on behalf of my family today. I will continue to be their voice and will be relentless in making sure justice is served. I am not only here to make an impact statement, but to appeal to you, Your Honor, to give George Wagner life without the possibility of parole. Growing up, our parents tell us monsters do not exist, but I had come to know that as a lie in my adult life. Make no mistake about it, George. You want to betray an innocent act and act like you were distant from your family, but the hard truth is you are one and the same heartless monster who helped brutally murder 8 people and never once backed out or reached out to stop this cruel act before it happened. It's hard to truly convey the impact of something of this magnitude. There are so many moments that have made an impact on me greatly over the last 6 years, sorry. But a few of those moments are very painful moments that I will forever remember vividly. Going into a funeral home and seeing 8 caskets lying along the wall of our loved ones, walking into that room with my family, hearing the screams from my mothers, my aunt, and my uncles while trying to hold them up because their legs gave away. I think everyone in that room felt their pain and would have done anything to take it away. That night, when it came time to say our final goodbyes and close the caskets, I'm sure our screams and sobs were heard from outside. As we had to be pulled away from that room, my grandmother, bearing 2 children and 3 grandchildren, no one should ever have that burden and pain. 6 years and 8 months later, we still have these unbearable moments where we feel like we could just break, knowing the callous way they were taken from us. If this is not enough to convince someone George is the cold-hearted monster he deserves to never leave prison, he stood outside my 16-year-old cousin's door waiting for his brother to go in and assassinate my little cousin. Little Chris went to bed on April 21st to get ready for school the next day, and he would never wake again. This cold-hearted, barbaric man who said Hannah Mae was a baby sister stood by while his brother went into her room and murdered her while her newborn baby girl lay beside her. He stood in my cousin Frankie's trailer again, supposedly his friend, while his brother slaughtered my cousin and his fiancée, while their baby lay between them. and Frankie's little boy lay sleeping on the couch. His son, who was 3 at the time, would be the one who would go into Frankie's room to see his daddy, and his daddy's fiance covered in blood. And they wouldn't wake up. This is a scene of utter devastation that no one should ever have to witness, let alone a 3-year-old child. 4 children without parents, 3 parents who are forever missing birthdays, holidays, and milestones with their children. Ruger, who is without both parents. Was too young to know how much he was really loved by his parents. Kylie, who will never get to experience her mother's love. Brentley, who deserved his father's guidance and love throughout his life. Sophia, who would not only lose her mommy on April 22nd, but she lost all of her immediate family. And then on November the 13th, 2018, she lost her dad's side of her immediate family. Regardless of the monsters they are, she still had a bond. The devastation and impact will forever weigh heavy on her for the rest of her life. I've tried to wrap my head around why my family was given death sentences, but nothing will justify the why. My cousin, Hannah Mae, was given a death sentence because she was a strong-willed mother who wanted to raise her daughter and continue to grow her family outside the Wagner's control. My cousin Gary, Hannah Hazel, little Chris, and my Aunt Nana was given a death sentence for just simply being there. My cousin Frankie, my Uncle Chris, and my Uncle Kenneth were given a death sentence for being the protectors of our family. It's sickening to think this is what caused the tragic loss of 8 people. George Wagner made the decision, and as a result of his actions, 8 lives were senselessly lost. He is just as guilty and should be held just as accountable. He is just the coward who made our family sit through a horrific trial when he knows the devastation that he helped create. No amount of justice given in this court will come close to what is deserved, but this man deserves nothing less than to spend the rest of his life in prison. This man and his family has confined our family to our own personal hell that we have to fight to get through every day. So it's only just that George is confined to a prison cell for the rest of his life. George, I hope that my family haunts your dreams at night, just like they do ours. I also hope there are days where you miss your family and son so much, you literally feel like you could die from the pain, because that is what our family deals with. I pray, George, that this court and the prison you are sent to show you the same mercy that you showed my family. The day you take your last breath, you will face your Maker, and I pray they have no mercy on your soul. But on that day, I will finally have a little bit of peace.
That was powerful because she said a lot of things that you can visualize. I remember going into a funeral home and seeing 8 caskets of my loved ones, hearing the screams, trying to hold each other up as their legs gave away. When they said their final goodbyes and they closed those coffins, the screams and sobs could probably be heard outside. They had to be pulled away from that room, and talks about Miss Geneva burying 2 children, 3 grandchildren, just the daughter-in-law who clearly everybody still loved and everybody had a good relationship. And then she recognizes too that Sophia lost her dad's side of the family in 2018. And even though they're evil, they still had a bond. And then she said, he's the coward who made us sit through a trial. I hope my family haunts you like they do us. That's powerful stuff. Last up, we have Tony Rhoden. He was the one that gave the statement and took some questions after the guilty verdict came in. And man, the one thing about the Rhodens and the Gillies is just their grace. It is there. It is embedded in these people, and it's obvious. Tony Rhoden said that night that he kind of felt sorry for George in a way because he's a human. And I don't think I could say that. I don't think I could sit through a trial. I think I would be one of those people you see on like Law and Crime on their show of Chaos in the Courtroom or something like that, where you breach the little divider and they got to peel you off the defendant. But a lot of grace, but a lot of anger, as there should be. So much loss. So we're going to hear from Tony Rhoden, who was the brother of Kenneth and Chris Sr. And so here we go.
My name is Tony Rhoden. I come here today to talk about my family and the memories that I have of them. First of all, I would like to thank the court and the state of Ohio for giving me the opportunity to do so as a victim. I lost two brothers, Chris Rhoden Sr., Kenneth Rhoden. I also lost a niece, Hannah Rhoden. I also lost two nephews, Frankie Rhoden, Chris Rhoden Jr. I also lost a cousin, Gary Rhoden. I also lost a sister-in-law, Dana Rhoden Manley. I also lost my nephew Frankie's fiancée, Hannah Hazel Gill. My brother Chris, my mom's son, as a boy, he always had a lot of questions, just about things like, Tony, why does a chicken have two legs? Or Tony, why does the water flow that way? He loved playing in the creek. When in the creek, we would get up, Chris and I and my other brothers, Stephen and Kenneth, would build small toy boats. We'd use whatever we could find. And we'd have boat races. I would let them win sometimes. 3 of them, 1 of me. We would take 5-gallon buckets and get behind skunks that was in our garden. Sneak, put the buckets on them. Catch them. So catching them in buckets, but not thinking about how to get the lids off of the buckets without getting sprayed. So we would turn them loose. To this day, I do not know how we didn't get sprayed. Chris hated school. As a young boy, I would have to chase him down and carry him to the bus. We all would wait for the bus to pull up the lane. Then, when it would, he would run across the cornfield. But later, as a teenager, he began to like school a little better. But still didn't want to be there. He could go 3 days a week and still was able to get straight A's. He could not wait to get a job and make money. I always admired his ability to watch and learn. Him and I and Robin, our boss, and a gentleman by the name of that we called Paul. Paul was 70 years old at the time. We built a playground, a pirate ship, just from us 4 getting together and talking. Chris always had the ability to look at a project and bring it to life. I love that about him. Chris got married and had 3 kids. He loved them. Was a big softie when it came to them. And I would talk about parenting with him a lot. Chris loved to work. He loved spending time with his family. He was very soft-spoken. People would ask me often, Tony, does your brother Chris ever talk? I would reply, that's his nature. If Chris could help someone, he would. No matter if he knew them or not, he would help. We would talk about fireworks a lot. He loved fireworks. Chris would always do research on fireworks and keep me up to date. I believe he got that from our dad, which also loved fireworks. I have so many memories of my brother Chris that I wish I could put them all down on paper. So whoever hears this today could see through my memories how my brother Chris really was. Caring, gracious, loving, family man, and kind. He taught me a lot, and I hope I was able to do the same for him. His life cut short by selfish acts of others. My brother Kenneth, my mom's son. As a young boy, he would always hang out with me and my other brothers, Chris, Stephen, and Brady. We would have mud fights in the creek, but when we got in trouble for doing that, Kenneth somehow got less punishment. For it, he always would have that innocent look about him. As a young boy and a teenager, he was a hard worker, loved old cars and old trucks, even at a young age. Loved his family, and he always showed it. When he married, he adopted 2 kids, loved them as his own. True love, he always had a way of showing them. I always admired that about him, the love he had for his kids, and not just his kids, all kids. I always felt I was the lucky one to be able to work with him and just see how, as a hard worker, he really was. A gracious, kind, caring, loving man. So many memories of him make me very sad. When I think of him, he had so much to offer other ones. His love for other people, all cut short by selfish acts of others. My niece Hannah, at a young age, her toys were hers. But if she liked you, then you could touch them, then play with them. When she became a little older, she would tag along with her brothers, Frankie and Christopher, come to my house to play pool with my kids. I had to be a referee in those games quite often. At a young age, she had 2 kids of her own. Right from the first one, you could see the love and caring she had in her for her kid. A true love from your mother touches the heart. She had that. Her children will not get to experience that from their true mother. My mom's granddaughter, her life cut short by selfish acts of others. My nephew Frankie, as a young kid, he would get into everything. When times at my house, he would want to touch whatever he could. I would tell him, leave that alone or I will cut your ears off. He loved the outdoors, loved to hunt. We would talk about it often. I miss those conversations. He had 2 children. Of them, a loving dad was becoming a good worker. His children were not to get experience the true love of their dad, my mom's grandson. His life cut short by selfish acts of others. My nephew Christopher, I like to refer to him as Little Chris. When little, he would walk around with his belly hanging out, his shirt. I would tell him, pull your shirt up. He would, but then that belly would pop right back out. If it had a motor on it, he was on it. He loved riding motors. One time my boss at work let him take a brand new Reaper. They are like small Jeeps for a test ride. My boss told him, do not go off the main road in the campground. Did he listen? Nope. Went trail riding and found the biggest mud hole he could and buried that Reaper in it. Well, guess what? Guess who got the phone call? Uncle Tony, he says. What are you doing? I say, house chores. He says, drop that and come get me. I am stuck in a mud hole. So we talked a bit, so I leave to get him out of the mud hole. When I arrived, he and his friend Tyler had that Reaper buried so bad you could barely see the seats. Took me a while to get it out, After that, I believe my boss had to sell it as a used one. Mud stains was not coming out. Little Chris gets his driver's license. Hitting me up for gas money. Gosh, anybody that has got their license for the first time knows that feeling. That feeling of freedom, hanging out with friends, driving around, and listening to music. My mom's grandson, his life cut short by selfish acts of others. My cousin Gary, my mom's nephew. As a kid, he would put rocks in my boots because he thought it was funny. As he got older, he liked pestering people. He knew if he pestered you enough, he would get a laugh out of you. He would always help people. I would be working with him. We would stop at store to get something to drink. I'd say, Gary, go in and get us something to drink, and he would. But he also bought lottery tickets out of my money. Loved his family. His life cut short by selfish acts of others. My sister-in-law, Dana, my mom's daughter-in-law, always spoke her mind. She would come to my house and tell me what I needed to do at my own house. When she walked in a room with other people in it, she would always have people laughing. She loved people, and it showed. She loved her family, would do anything for them. Her life cut short by selfish acts of others. Also, my nephew Frankie's fiance, Hannah Hazel Gilly, just started their lives together. A very nice, respectful person. I always like to refer to her as Little Hannah. She told me that was fine if I did that. She could tell, I could tell, that she was going to be a good mother to her newborn that she just had. Her life cut short by selfish acts of others. I have talked about each one of my family members a little bit, but to really know who they was as a person, we would have to talk about all the memories of them all. Now I would like to tell a story that is true to its core. On November the 13th, 2018, there was an arrest in the murders of my family the same year around Christmas time. My sister Wilma played phone tag back and forth, trying to get the authorities to let Sophia and Bullvine spend Christmas dinner at our family. So it happened, and all the kids just loved him. And at this Christmas dinner, our mom was handing out presents to her younger grandchildren and her great-grandchildren. So they all filing through, sitting on Mom's lap as she hands their present to them. Pictures were being taken. And then Bullvine's name is called. He walks up to Mom. She puts him on her lap. She hands him the present. Pictures are taken. She puts him down and gives him a hug. I am sitting in the kitchen crying as I watch. Bullvine is no relation to our family, but he is the defendant's son. True love, that's what was showed that Christmas dinner. It was embedded by our mom to all of her kids. We all have it in us. Chris taught it to his kids, it showed. Kenneth taught it to his, and it still shows. True love. I'd like to read this statement from my mom. Geneva Rhoden. George Wagner, you are still breathing. My two sons are not breathing. My grandchildren are not breathing. They are all children left behind. I'd just like to see some justice.
I have cold chills watching this for a second time, and he was amazing after the guilty verdict, and he drove it home today, y'all. That story about that Christmas, not a little more than a month after the Wagners were arrested, to reach out, obviously repeatedly, to get Sophia and Bolvon there with their family for that very first Christmas that just can't imagine. We're going through our first Christmas without two people we love. Eight, the youngest being 16 is what they went through, and they bring the defendant's son there. And just Geneva Rhoden putting that boy on her lap, giving him a present, giving him a hug. Tony cries from the next room. That's true love. It was shown that Christmas dinner. And I also thought it was powerful how at the end of every single person's story, his or her life cut short by the selfish act of others. And I think that everybody who spoke today gave us all the biggest glimpse we've had so far into the humans that the Rhodens and Hannah Gilley was, and the loss they feel. So the defense ultimately asked for minimum sentences and that the burglaries and the tampering be merged into one. George did not speak on his behalf, but his attorneys say he still maintains his innocence. Judge Deering talks about the different factors that he needs to consider in opposing the sentences by law, also at his discretion. And he talks about it's more serious than others, obviously, the impact on the families, the survivors, the youngest age of the victim being 16 and the oldest just 44. George, according to Judge Deering, did not live a law-abiding life, and even if he was never prosecuted or convicted of the other crimes or acts, it shows no remorse and nothing but denial. He asks if he can impose George's sentence right now, and there's no objection. So he says, no sentence I can impose can right the wrong imposed on these families. Murder is an irreversible act. Murders do meet the worst conditions. Invasions of their homes and bedrooms, and asleep with two infants in the bed with them. It was anticipated and planned that harm and death would be caused. So 8 life sentences, 121 years on top of that, never seeing the light of day again. And just, wow, what a case, y'all. What a case. And I think the thing for me is in the months they spent planning, did they really think they would get away with it? Were they all for that delusional and that above it and thought they were that smart that they thought, we'll never get caught. We'll take these kids and move to Alaska and live happily ever after. It's crazy. Anyways, that's it. That wraps up George Wagner's trial, conviction, and sentencing. We'll do the same for Billy Wagner. I think he'll take it to trial. He has nothing to lose, unfortunately. This family will have to sit through this again. They'll give their victim impact statements when he's found guilty, like I totally think he will be. And I hope this Christmas that the Rhodens and the Gilley families, their loved ones, have a little bit of peace. And I really, really hope that tradition of having Bolvon and Sophia has gone on. And if it hasn't, what a special memory so close after the arrest to show unconditional love, which is something that none of the Wagners ever could have done. All right, guys, thanks for all the new listeners that have joined me. I hope you stick around. It's all about these victims and the living victims and justice. So we'll see you soon. Hope you have a good one.